Today on episode 180 of the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, we speak to coaching expert Lynn Guerin, and he's going to download all the coaching wisdom from the most successful coach in NCAA basketball history. That's right, folks. It's all about being the best coach today, the wooden way. Are you ready for this? All right, let's do it. Welcome one, welcome all to the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, a weekly podcast series dedicated to helping you hit peak performance across the three domains of leadership. Those being leading yourself, leading your team, and leading your organization. This podcast couples my 20 years of military experience as a senior Canadian Army officer with world-class guests to bring you the most complete podcast of leadership going. And for more, feel free to check out our website at movingforwardleadership.com. And with that, let's get to the show. Yes, welcome one, welcome all. Thanks for coming out. It's your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy, and I'm stoked that you and thousands of you are tuning into this podcast on a weekly basis. It's incredible. I never thought we would get to where we are today, but nonetheless, because of you, because of this show, here we are influencing thousands of people literally across the globe in becoming the best leaders possible. And for the love of God, thankfully, not becoming horrible bosses. And today we're going to be talking about coaching and how to be the best coach possible. But before we dive into that and who Lynn Guerin is, just wanted to ask you, are you part of our group? Seriously, are you part of our group? The Moving Forward Leadership group on Facebook. If not, just go to movingforwardleadership.com/group and you're going to find over 4,000. That's right, over 4,000 leaders in there. Talking leadership, not spamming, not memeing, not quoting, but talking real leadership. And that's why we're there. All right. So if you're not part of that, again, movingforwardleadership.com/group, and I'll bring you right to the Facebook group. Now, talking about groups, a group is a great way to be coached. There are so many people in there that can help you, and that is what we're talking about today. Why? Because as a leader, it is your job, it is your duty, it's your responsibility to develop your people in a successful way. And leaders, not bosses, coach their people. Bosses degrade, yell, basically put their thumb on you and push you in the direction that they need you to go, that way, or bullying you or whatever. But us as leaders, we don't do those things. Instead, we inspire, we motivate, we elevate our people. And the most successful way to do that is through coaching. So with that, I brought Lynn Guerin on the show, and he is the CEO of the John R. Wooden course. Now, John Wooden was the most successful NCAA basketball coach in history. He won 38 straight tournaments, 10 championships in just 12 years. So John developed this system, which Lynn turned around and became, obsessed with. So much that he's the CEO of the course and the whole organization revolving around it. So we talk about John's system that enabled him to coach and mentor his players to this great heights of success. We talk about how it helps achieve peak performance. We talk about really what makes a great coach, right? We also discuss how leading by example is so crucial to success, why being a teacher is important as a leader, how humility and being humble, to talk about your failures as a coach and a leader, and how to create sustained peak performance, because that's what we want. We want to be constantly hitting that peak performance level day in, day out, not for short periods of time. So these are the topics that we talk about in this show today. And I know you're going to enjoy it. You're going to get a lot of it. Why? Because it is jam-packed with knowledge bombs. And that is it. So you know what? I think it's time for me to be quiet now and let you listen to the interview. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my interview about the coach's way to leadership with Lynn Guerin. Lynn, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you. Delighted to be here.
Awesome. So we're talking about your book, Coach 'em Up, Coach 'em Way Up, 5 Lessons for Leading the John Wooden Way. So out of the gate, I got to know, how are these 5 lessons going to help leaders out there, hit peak performance? Here at the show, we're talking about peak performance leadership. So leading yourself, hitting that peak performance, you as the leader, leading your team, i.e. the individuals within your organization, and finally leading your organization, that institution. So there's a lot of in-depth topics in this book. So from your standpoint, how is that going to help the leaders out there today?
Well, I think the book represents perhaps a change in the mindset of a lot of leaders today. I think we think that coaching is really the new paradigm for effective leadership. Don't know if that was always true. We like to say in the book that not all good leaders are good coaches, but all good coaches are good leaders. We think there's a whole new set of coaching skills that's really important today to be an effective leader with a changing workforce. It seems today that a lot of younger people really don't like to be bossed or supervised or led or managed, but they do seem to be a little more comfortable with being coached, because I think that's more of a framework around the relationship, probably better communication, more likely to be focused on how the individual is going to benefit, maybe not quite as much focus on ultimately how the organization's going to benefit. So today, leaders have a whole new level of challenge of making things work for the organization by making them work better for people. And we think that's what coaching is really all about. So we're really focused on helping managers become great coaches, on helping leaders think of themselves more as a head coach, and know that certainly they need to have leadership skills within that framework, but first and foremost, they need to be an effective coach.
I really love that part you mentioned, that the subordinates of today don't want to be bossed around, and the whole tagline here of the show is lead, don't boss. And it just really resonates with me that coaching is definitely a great way to unlock the potential in your people, to get them to see their full potential, to get them to believe in themselves sometimes when they don't think that they have the ability or the skill set to achieve something, or push that little bit harder to go for that extra goal. You could easily go ahead and try to boss them, like, no, you will do this, or you can't do this, you will, type thing, really directive at them. And then you just see people just shut down. Whereas, hey, look at it this way, or change your mindset and tweak this. Have you ever thought about this other thing? Tell me why you don't think you can do that. And then you start really seeing, the potential unlocking from the individuals. So you mentioned, leaders basically need to be great coaches in order to succeed today. So what does that look like? What aspects are there in a great coach?
Well, I think there's a framework. Coach Wooden, I used to like to say, it's a lot better to be out front with a banner than to be behind with a whip. But the question is, what's on that banner? What's the key messaging and communication that people really find inspiring? And that's really an important element of a great coach. We've written the book around basically a coaching model, the way in which we think John Wooden effectively coached his entire life. And it wasn't just coaching a basketball team. I mean, he used to people used to ask him if did he coach his family like he coached his team, and his answer always was, "No, I pretty much coach my team like I coach my family." So the ability to really create a good, loving, working, understanding relationship with each person, and know that the really quality coaching really starts, as we define it in the model, really starts with the quality of a person's thinking, and their thinking obviously is really going to come out of the set of values that they're operating under, what their mind is really focused on, what their heart is focused on, what they're about morally, and what they're about ethically, and what they're about spiritually, how they see people and the importance of people, how a coach sees the potential in each person, not what the team can ultimately accomplish. That's always very critical. Uh, as Coach Wooden would always say, the star of the team is the team. So he was very focused on team behavior, which organizations need to be today. If you're going to develop a powerful culture, it's got to be more about the team than the individuals. And that's got to be true for every individual in the team at every level of the corporation. So we've got this powerful 5-part model about what an effective coach looks like. And it all starts with the quality of a person's thinking uh, that really frames their ability to be a good coach.
Really liked a lot that you said there in the first part that you came out with. The leader needs to be out front, holding the banner. And that really resonates with me, and basically leading by example, right? Being out there, showing your people what it means to be a great member of that organization, that team, being a leader within it, showing what's expected, and how to act when you fail and slip up, and all these other things that come along with the job.
Yeah,
Uh,
that second part, Scott, that is the second part of our model. The part one is the quality of your thinking, but the second part is the example you set. And that's got to be as much true in terms of the person you are, not just who you are around the office, or who you are when it comes to talking to your people about the business or the products or the clients or the goals or the big visions and dreams that a lot of companies have. But who are you day to day in the kind of person you are, the values you have, the way you treat people, the way you talk to people, how considerate of people you are. Coach Wood liked to say that the two most important words in the dictionary were love and balance. Well, how do you bring love and balance to every single thing you do in the example you set all day at work? And that example is only as good as the person you are at home. You can't be one person during the day and one person later when you go home. And that was the amazing thing. Coach Wooden's wife used to say she could never tell when he got home from work how the day went, whether he had a good practice, a bad practice, whether the team won or lost. He always was on such an even keel, emotionally, spiritually. Um, he just had that consistency of high quality behavior that enabled him to be that same person. He was one of those guys. He could talk the talk, but he was a lot more about walking the walk and setting the example, in showing people what he meant by the person he was and the life he lived.
our ability to lead basically rests on both our credibility and our integrity. And I recently I do a Monday show, which is very short, quick, 5 minutes. And I call it the Monday Leadership Minute, where I just talk for 5 minutes on a topic that's either question asked to me or something that's on my heart at the time. And that was on my heart was integrity and credibility. And the moral of the story of that episode was rent is due every single day. You have to show up and lead with credibility and integrity every single day, every single second, every single hour, every single action that you do, is ultimately, I shouldn't say being scrutinized, but it shows the character that you are. So if you do one thing at home and turn around and be a completely different type of person, then that is going to speak volumes when it comes out, when things come out. And that's what I'm hearing from you, is that you have to, as a leader, we have to keep our credibility. We have to keep our integrity, and be those type of people. So we somewhat dove into the second lesson for leading the coach's way there. Let's bring right back to the first one. So yeah, what was that again?
Basically, point one is it's all about the quality of your thinking. A great coach is a great thinker, and he has a very definable philosophy on the most important things that his life and his profession is involved in. He's a quality thinker about all of those things. Coach Wooden liked to say, he had a phrase, pursue wisdom. He was always pursuing the highest quality of thinking that he possibly could. He was a firm believer in that continuum that ultimately thinking is the key element that influences your feelings, your behavior, and your actions. And the quality of your thinking is really going to determine how you think about yourself, how you think about other people, how you think about life, how you think about work, how you think about the values that direct your thinking on a day-to-day basis. When you find yourself in a bad place, most of the time we try to change our actions, but that never happens until we change our mind. And you got to get your mind in a place to ultimately impact the feelings and the actions and the behavior that you've got to take to be an effective coach and effective leader. Now, one of the things that Coach had to work with that was so powerful was this idea of the pyramid of success. He had spent 14 years trying to define success from a behavioral standpoint, and then he spent the next 7 decades of his life basically trying to live out, right? We said Coach was all about a guy who walked the talk. Well, what he walked was basically as he modeled all of the behaviors on the pyramid of success, one of which you mentioned, very important, integrity. Integrity was one of those 4 or 5 things that represented on his pyramid a whole block of character ideas, things like sincerity and honesty and reliability and integrity. These were the key things that made up basically his definition and understanding and model of character, high character, that he modeled every single day.
It's tough being alone as a leader. You're often in situations where you're not sure where to go. You're not sure what's the best decision. Yet, as Colin Powell once said, it's lonely at the top. And reality is, it takes time. Sure, you can read books and listen to podcasts such as this one, but nothing beats experience. But who has time for experience when you're at a situation right now that requires experience to lead yourself, your team, your organization through? That's where coaching comes in. You see, coaching enables you to unlock the experience in others. Right here, right now, you have 20 years of military service, plus 150 plus episodes of interviews and topics and research sitting at your disposal. So what are you waiting for? Are you ready to level up your game, become that leader that you know you're meant to be? Are you ready to go to the next level? If so, drop me a line, scott@movingforwardleadership.com, or swing by the website and book a discovery call through movingforwardleadership.com/book. And let's get you moving in the right direction, leading better, leading more effectively today, right here, right now. Starting off with leading yourself. And then let's focus on how you can build your high-performing team to drive your organization's output higher, faster, harder. today. Not next week, not next month, but today. All right, folks, that's it. Now let's get back to the show. That's awesome. I love it. And I often now say that us as leaders, we need to be more focused on the questions than knowing the answers, because that in turn, drives our people to think and really reflect and look at the situation that's in front of us. And I'm hearing similar thoughts from you there, although in much greater detail and a little bit more polished, let's say.
Well, it's interesting, Scott, as you mentioned, the idea there about, thinking and connecting to key ideas like integrity and causing and affecting other people's thinking. John Wooden never tried to tell people what to think. What he did was he caused people to think. He wanted to give people the opportunity and to think for themselves. And that's what I hear from a lot of younger people today. And, when people ask me, well, geez, Coach Wooden has been dead for 10 years. He was 99 when he died. He hasn't coached since 1975. Is the man still relevant today? Well, he's more relevant than he's ever been because of the quality of his thinking. And as young people tell me that they really want to think for themselves, that's what John Wooden helped to teach people to do. He caused them and challenged them to think for themselves and to find the answers to life's most pressing problems and most biggest opportunities. That was one of the things that made him such a great coach. He certainly knew how to do things and knew how to think about things, but he really was really big on challenging people to think for themselves.
That's awesome. Hey, here's my, I guess, beef when people bring up things like that is that, I say there's absolutely, there's basically nothing new in leadership, but it's how we apply it and the way that we develop our principles that matters, right? And changes throughout time. So, so what? It was 1979, the last time he coached. But the principles of motivating and inspiring and developing people, those last lifetimes, generations, years, millennia, because as human beings, that those things remain essentially almost constant. Yeah, sure, some internal or external motivating factors may change from time to time. People get a little bit less worried about money and perks and all this stuff and more about worried about quality of life. But still, if you apply those principles, it stays the same. So like you said, good stuff lasts forever. So
well,
that's awesome.
We like to use the phrase "timeless wisdom." I think that really is what John Wooden's thinking and teachings and writings represent, and I believe they're more relevant, and I believe they're more important today than they've ever been with all the cultural challenges we have out there today. People trying to figure out their lives and their relationships and their place, the whole world asking themselves, who matters, right? Well, everybody matters, and every single individual matters. We're all made in God's image. The good Lord didn't make any junk. Doesn't expect us to act that way. And that's really, Coach was all about helping people be inspired about who they are and who they can be and what it means to be your best and to give your best effort to become your best and perform your best. And oh, by the way, ultimately be in a position to help others become their best. The idea that, the real joy in life is to help and serve others. No joy in life until you do something that really benefits others. That's where the true joy in life comes from. And what he really loved to do was teach and coach. He was called Coach Wooden, but he called himself just a teacher. And that's really what it was all about, teaching that helped people be the best they could be.
Serving others speaks to my heart. Seeing you're talking to a guy who's still serving in the Canadian Army on his day job and serving others through this podcast and through my side business and all those things. So, it's a great conversation. Love it. So let's dive into the third lesson out there. So we hit on the first two. Let's dive into the mindset one and the leading by example. Let's dive into lesson number 3. So what's that one, and how can leaders apply
Yeah,
it?
lesson number 3 is it's all about how you teach. And Coach Wooden
Imagine that.
taught, yeah, yeah, how you think, essentially the example you set. And the example you set, Coach Wooden believe, is always the best teacher. That's where teaching starts. Values are really caught, not taught. And people pay a lot more attention to what you do than what you say. But John Wooden was a master teacher. He knew all of the principles of what pedagogy and great education and great instruction and all of the fundamentals of whole part whole and breaking things down into their component parts. And he had the mind of a bridge builder and the heart of a poet. And that was a very unique set of capabilities when it came to teaching people. He worked very hard at being an expert in his craft. He doesn't think you can be a really great teacher unless, guess what? You really know what you're talking about. It really helps if you're going to teach to know what you're talking about. And oh, by the way, it really helps if you've experienced what you're trying to help others figure out, because experience is always one of our great teachers. And often our most negative experiences, our most difficult challenges, the adversity in our life is always the best teacher. So Coach Wooden was a master teacher, a master at breaking down the details. He was a master at analyzing things from the standpoint of understanding what the fundamentals were. He could break down the game of life. He could break down the game of basketball. He could break down a sentence as an English teacher and knew how to teach that. He could break down a poem to its core components. And he could put it all back together. I like to say he actually went to college to be a civil engineer. He wanted to build roads and bridges when he went away to Purdue initially, but couldn't work in the summer times because he couldn't go to school in the summertime as part of their camps that engineers had to go through because he had to work. So ultimately he changed his curriculum, but he really had the mind of an engineer and a builder. He could see a bridge. He could break it down into its smallest components, right down to its basic parts. But then he had the ability to construct it and then ultimately to lead people across it as the coach and motivator he was. So he had this incredible body of diverse skills that helped him be just a really, really great teacher of the fundamentals of the game, but more importantly, the fundamentals of the game of life.
I love that, and I think one of the great assets that any leader can have is the ability to take big problems and break them down into smaller bite-sized problems that are easily digestible, and for the team to actually understand and enable you to guide and mentor and teach. Now, you brought up one interesting thing, and that is bad experience is one of the greatest teachers of all, right? uh, but it takes a lot for leaders out there to develop that humility to be open and transparent with their teams about um, of these experiences. So what's your best advice for the leader out there going, yeah, I do have these experiences where I messed up, or I made a mistake, or whatever, something along those lines, but I don't want my team to see that failure part side of me. But yeah, I know it would be a great lesson for them. What's your best advice for them out there?
Well, I'd ask that leader, who you trying to kid? Um, right? I mean, we all make mistakes in life, and we all have the opportunity to learn from those mistakes. We hear the word authentic a lot. Well, somebody that comes off as if somebody that knows it all, has done it all, has never failed at any of it. there's no way that person's going to come off as authentic. I mean, you can see right through that pretty quickly. And coaches' most fundamental teaching growing up started with something very simple that his dad gave him in something called the 7-point creed, that was be true to yourself. Well, as an authentic leader, we spend our whole life trying to figure out who we really are. Well, a big part of that analysis is, what are our flaws? What are the mistakes we've made? What are our misunderstandings? We all grew up through different circumstances with imperfect parents and imperfect situations and imperfect relatives and imperfect situations and decisions that we've made. Those are all of our teachers in life. And trying to portray to a group of people that you're working with that man, you're not fallible and you don't make mistakes. The people who don't make mistakes are the people who don't do anything. And an important question I would want to ask any leader is, what have been the most important lessons they've learned from the biggest mistakes they've made? And the ability to understand that and share that, and not just from a business standpoint, but from a human standpoint. I mean, the quality of our work is basically about the quality of our relationships with the people that we get a chance to be with every day, that we get a chance to help, go after goals and try to accomplish big things together, both individually and as teams. And man, that only happens as we strive together and we struggle together. That's how good teams become great teams.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Especially the last part there, how good teams become great teams. Because that's one of the goals here at the show, is become one of those great teams, one of those teams that hits peak performance. And that means being great and being open with each other and transparent and humble and all these things. So
Well,
fantastic.
the other thing connected to that, Scott, is the idea of when you say peak performance, that's not really the challenge. The challenge is that dynasty kind of thinking. I mean, reaching a level of peak performance is good, but the real challenge is sustained excellence. There's a lot of coaches who might have won one championship, or a number of teams that won the big one time, or you did something right in your life. The question is, and what was so amazing about John Wooden was the whole idea of sustained excellence. He did something I can't think of any other example, certainly not in college basketball, where a coach took his team to the final championship game, that game that ultimately has the most visibility, the most pressure, the most at stake. He did it 10 times and he won all 10 of those. 10 for 10 in the biggest game. Sustained excellence, a dynasty, year after year excellence. And that's what he was really after. He used to say he would hope that his best friends would all have a chance to win one championship. But ironically, the people that maybe he wasn't as crazy about, he would hope they'd win too, because it was a lot harder to stay on top once you'd won a couple and thought you'd gotten pretty good at it than it was to keep it going year after year after year. There was a very popular business book written many years ago called Good to Great by a guy named Jim Collins, probably one of the best-selling business books of all time. The companies that he talked about in that today hardly even are on the radar as good companies, because they could not create that sustained excellence that 30 or 40 years later still has them at the top of their industry. That's the challenge. And even for new companies, it isn't just how do we get there, how do we stay? A great example in my mind is Chick-fil-A. We actually worked with them, have worked with them over a number of years ago. And Coach Wooden actually spoke to all their operators, all of the people that run their stores in a conference. And their challenge that day, that was exactly why they wanted Coach to talk to them. They were pretty good and getting better and doing well every year. But how do they get on that roll? How do they create that sustained excellence over time? Well, that speech was some 15 years ago. And guess what? They're still on that roll. They're better than they've ever been. They continue to attract good people, deliver state of the art customer service, provide fresh food and fresh perspective to building a great corporate culture.
That's I can't disagree with you, but I would say that probably my definition of peak performance includes your definition of sustained performance, because you're right. That's the goal, is that you don't want to go up, hit the gold medal and then go, okay, I'm going to drop off the radar, because organizations last longer, people's jobs last longer than that. So here's the golden question: how is it that leaders out there can keep their team at that high level for long periods of
Well,
time?
I think the team never exceeds the ability of the leader when it comes to setting all of those examples, modeling and mentoring and guiding and teaching from the day-to-day behavior that's needed to create sustained excellence. And it's only as good as the set of values on which the company is founded and the purpose for why the company exists. And as long as those foundations and fundamentals are in place, and the company continues to focus on that drive for excellence and perfection, and know that it's ultimately about people, right? They're only going to perform as well as their leaders and the quality of people they have and the quality of culture that is sustaining that excellence. Then you got a chance to keep it going. Any of those things fail, the leadership, the culture, the quality, the process, then things begin to come apart. You got to keep all of those things coming together and continually improving. John Wooden was way ahead of his time when it came to continuous improvement and quality principles. I lived in my business career, particularly in the automotive area, through that whole process of TQI, total quality experience, and what that means. We actually started our work with Coach Wooden working for Toyota, who knew more about quality than practically anybody on the planet, and taught many of American companies what quality is all about. So John Wooden was a high competent quality leader long before anybody was talking about those quality principles.
Love it. Now, Lynn, we went through 1 through 3 of the lessons, and we had this nice, huge, beautiful side tangent conversation. But at the same time, I want to be cognizant of your time. So I'd quickly like to dive into the last 2 lessons, just so we can wrap this up in a nice package for the listener out there, because they're probably going, okay, great guys, all great stuff, but what's lesson 3,
lesson
5,
4, and 5? So lesson 4 emerges
5,
out of the quality of your teaching. If you're a great thinker, if you're setting a good example, if you're doing effective teaching with your people, you have set up the opportunity to be an effective leader. And you've got a platform and a core of competence and character from which real leadership can be provided. And you have an opportunity to be an effective leader. So you move from how you think, the example you set, and how you teach, to then taking that leadership role and being effective at it. And when you do that, you put yourself in a position to earn the opportunity to go to point 5, which is to be an effective mentor. Well, mentoring is about 2 things. It's something you do, but it's also something you are and something you need. And so looking for mentors yourself and being a mentor ultimately over time is part of the continuous cycle of that we're talking about here, because being a mentor, you're going to learn in that process. Having mentors, you're going to learn in that process. Ultimately, that's going to improve the quality of your thinking, which takes you back to the beginning of the process.
Love it. I love basically platforms that bring you right back, because you need to be continuously reevaluating and looking at your situation and making sure that all is good. That make sure that everything still is current, that it's still applicable, that it makes sense in the situation that you're in. So it's that continuous loop to ensure and reevaluate and revisit and minor tweaks along the way and improve constantly. Love it.
Coach
Absolutely.
Wooden spent his whole life being a mentor and being mentored. I mean, we do a lot of teaching of kind of how Coach Wooden got to be Coach Wooden and who are the people that really influenced him. And it started very early with quality parents, with a set of coaches. He was a student of the great thinkers and writers and teachers. He was a voracious reader, whether it was Mother Teresa or Abraham Lincoln or Thomas Edison or Winston Churchill or great thinkers and leaders and writers and poets, a great student of the Bible. John Wooden really did his homework when it came to mentors of his own. He had spiritual mentors, he had leadership mentors, he had personal mentors, and he had coaches in the game of basketball and the game of life who also served as his mentors. So, it's a great opportunity we have to coach and mentor. It's a privilege. It's a responsibility. It starts with parenting. The toughest job we have is ultimately becoming great parents. And like Coach said, he tried to be the kind of parent as he was the kind of coach, and his team and his family were essentially all one thing. He liked to say that his ultimate priorities was his family, his friends, and his faith, and he hoped God would forgive him for that, but thought he might understand how that worked in his life. John Wooden was doing quality thinking right down to the final thoughts he literally had before he passed away. His deathbed conversation with his pastor, who asked him what was on his heart in his final moments, asked him if he wanted to hear any scripture from the Bible. And Coach Wooden was read the great commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your spirit, and love your neighbor as yourself. And his pastor asked him how that worked. And Coach Wooden said he was still working on it, right down to his final moments. And then his pastor asked him which one was he working on right at that moment. And John Wooden's final words were loving God. So he knew what he was about, and he knew who his ultimate mentor was, and what his priorities in life ultimately are. And he was thinking exactly what he should have been thinking about at that final moment of his earthly existence. That's pretty remarkable.
Amazing. Well, sir, this has been a absolutely inspiring and interesting conversation. But so, fortunately, all the good things do come to an end. But before we wrap up, I got a couple last questions for you, Lynn. First being a question I ask all the guests here at the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. And that's according to you, Lynn Guerin, what makes a great leader?
Well, I think what makes a great leader is a great person. A great person and a great person comes out of who they are, their character, and their values. That's what makes a great leader.
Love it. Can't get much more to the core than that. And the final thing is, how can people find you? How can they follow you? Be part of your journey? It's all about you. And shameless plugs. How about it?
Well, our book, Coach 'em Way Up, is available about anywhere you can buy a book today, Amazon and all the main bookstores. Also at entrepreneurpress.com. They're the publishers. We have a website, thejohnrwoodencourse.com is where you can find our tools and our materials and our services. And there's also a website, coachemwayup.com, where you can get more information on the book as well. We are doing coaching and consulting on a regular basis. We're helping people become certified John Wooden coaches. You can check out our website if that's an opportunity you might be interested in.
Awesome. And as always, for you, the listener, it's easy. Just go to movingforwardleadership.com/180. Lynn, thank you again, my friend. It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure. And
Scott, enjoyed it very much. Thank you for your insights. Appreciate it.
And that's a wrap for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. But you know what you could do to truly support the podcast? And no, that's not leaving a rating and review. It's simply helping a friend. And that is helping a friend by sharing this episode with them if you think this would resonate with them and help them elevate their performance level, whether that's within themselves, their teams, or their organization. So do that. Help me, help a friend, win-win all around. And hey, you look like a great friend at the same time. So just hit that little share button on your app, and then feel free to fire this episode to anyone that you feel would benefit from it. Finally, there's always more. There's always more lessons around being the highest performing leader that you can possibly be, whether that's for yourself, your team, or your organization. So why don't you subscribe? Subscribe to the show via movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. And until next time, lead, don't boss, and thanks for coming out. Take care now.